Hi, I hope people listening to me can see me, can hear me. Yeah? Do I get an indication? Okay. If you would put your name up and where you are, that would be really helpful. Uh, yeah, not sure that anybody is there yet. Oh, hi everybody. Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, is anybody there? So my name is Cindy Solonec, and I'm the author of Debesa, this book that you can see behind me. Kaya, hello. Wanju, welcome. I am in Bulu in Western Australia. Oh, great. Here we are. Some people are coming in. Hello, Yvonne in Northern Rivers in New South Wales. Mark, hello. Louise, Anne from Adelaide. Oh, this is lovely. Okay. Oh, thank you, Louise. I'm quite new to this, so bear with me if I'm a little bit, not so polished. Right. Okay, Judith, Mark, Carolyn, Zenica. Hi, Zenica. John, and John's in Perth, where I am. So I'll start again, and I will welcome you in the Noongar way. So Kaya, which means hello, and Wanju, which means welcome. So my name is Cindy Solonec, and I am on Bulu in Western Australia. It's now just gone 10 o'clock on another delightful day in our lovely city. So please, as you settle in, as you were doing, you're letting me know where you are. It's a bit early to have a wine, so I've got a glass of water. So I hope you have a cuppa or something there too. And I have a little irritation in my throat, so I hope it doesn't irritate you or me as I speak. So make yourselves comfortable, and my understanding is I'll talk for about 10 minutes and then I will answer some of your questions. This story is about Frank and Katie Rodriguez mostly. They are my parents, and it is a real life story written as creative non-fiction. So creative non-fiction is a bit like having a black and white picture or cartoon and colouring it in with nice colours. So it enhances the story. I am a Nyingana woman from the West Kimberley. That's around the Matawarra and Fitzroy River Valley area in the West Kimberley. Now, though, I live off country. I live in Bulu, which is Wudjak Noongar, which is on Wudjak Noongar Budja in the southwest of Western Australia. And to put that into English, I live in Perth, on the lands of the Aboriginal people from the southwest of Western Australia. So having said that, and now that more people have joined us, Lillian, welcome. And yes, this is based on my PhD. I would like to acknowledge the custodians of this land, who are the Whadjuk Noongar people here in Perth or in Bulu. I live here with my husband and our 18-year-old cat, Oliver, and 7-year-old dog, Donna. So I hope she behaves herself. I can see her outside. She likes to see who's going past in the street. So what's it like where you are today? The weather here in Bulu, in Perth, is simply beautiful. We have a lot of rain, and we have clear days, and then we'll have rain and clear days. So that's always really nice. So we get the sun that comes out after lovely rain. It's a lovely time of the year, and it's what the Westerners call autumn. But here in Perth, Noongars call this time of the year Durin. So it's Djern. It's a time when the winds come from a southerly direction. They later on in winter, we do have some cold days, but not too many, fortunately. And I think that's when the winds come off the South Pole. So also you can see at this time of the year in Perth, red flowering gum, the flowers of the red flowering gum tree, and other petite flowers. And the banksias start to blossom as well, and they provide nectar for many small mammals and birds in this place. So although most of the beautiful bush flowers come out in the spring that Noongars call Cumberang. So that's where I live, here on Budja, 2,200 kilometres away from my country in the Kimberley. And I must admit that I know more Noongar language than I do my own Indigenous languages from the Kimberley. But I have lived here for quite a few years. Okay, so we've got more people. We've got Jane and Melissa in Sydney, and Rhonda in Queensland. Lovely. And to come back to you, Natalie, was it Natalie? Lillian, sorry. This is based on my PhD, but since I completed the PhD in 2016, I have done more research. And of course, so there's more in it. As my chief supervisor, when he read Debesa, he said, "You've added to it, haven't you?" I said, "Yes, I have." So, which was nice to be able to do that, actually. So I'm probably a little bit different to your usual writers in that I'm an accidental writer. I didn't know that I was going to write a book. So let me tell you how that came about and how that happened. So after completing my PhD in 2016, two of the examiners said that this was a social history, which my thesis is a social history, that needs to have a wider audience. And they both, said, it's a history of marginalised peoples that's not necessarily told. And that's very true. So usually history is written about the rich and famous or the well-known or whatever appeals to historians. So this is a bit different. And it's about, excuse me, Derby. So for people who know the area will know that the prominent towns are Broome and Kununurra, and Derby is less known. So it's nice to have Derby written about. Let me see, and cool, very cool in Adelaide with showers. Normally you get the weather that we have, so you've got some nice weather coming. That's fine, Rhonda. See, Rhonda has to go, that's fine. We'll see you in a while. I do explain in the book how and why I chose to spell the Aboriginal words the way I do. And Aboriginal languages, didn't come with the lexicon like English and like European and languages. So the spelling of Australian Aboriginal languages is quite recent. Just actually in very recent years, the dictionaries and what started to come out. So there's no real standard for spelling, and I do explain that. So there's a variety. A bit like American English is different spellings to English, British English. So I must point out that this book is written from Aboriginal perspectives to the best that I could. That is the way I choose to write sentences and the words and terms that I choose to use. For instance, when I was sent the blurb to go on the back of this book, it said that Debesa was set in the harsh beauty of the West Kimberley. Well, I asked for the word harsh to be dropped because it's only harsh in the eyes of Westerners, not in the eyes of the people who have lived there for thousands of years. So I'm quite selective or there are words rather that I don't use. And I do use in this local words and place names that make sense in the context in which it's written. And it's not a hard book to read, it's quite easy to read. Thank you, Jane. And Therese from Hobart's joined us as well. So let me tell you about Debesa. It is a small 54,000 acre pastoral lease, 100 kilometres east of Derby. So you might be well aware that pastoral properties are up to 1 million acres. Well, this one was a little one. It was owned and run by my parents, and Debesa was my childhood home. So here it is here, Debesa, and I can see Dex has got it on here, so you can see it quite clearly. And that's a shearing shed there, and if you look very closely at it, you can see a man in a white shirt, and that's my dad. The homestead is right further back. You see where all the green foliage is in the back there. I think that's a big Poinciana tree, actually, amongst the beautiful gums. So it was during the 1950s and 60s around the Martawarra, which is the Fitzroy River Valley, there were sheep, not just cattle, but sheep. So initially pastoralists tried to run sheep, but eventually, it was not viable to have sheep up there, and wool prices fell, things like that. So by, I don't know, the early 1970s, sheep were all gone. Now it's cattle country. So my book was released on the 1st of May, and it will be launched in Derby on the 11th of June at the Holy Rosary Primary School. The principal there is quite happy to have the event at her school because she wants the kids to know more about the history of their school and how it got its name, which is all in the book. And I think the school choir are going to sing, so that'll be really, really nice. And Magabala, Zenica Mob, they're organising the launch, so it's all in their capable hands while I'm here 2,000 kilometres away in Perth. So at the centre of this story are my parents. Frank was a Spaniard from Galicia in the northwest of Spain, and Mum is a Nyingana woman from the West Kimberley in the northwest of Australia. Mum died in 1994 and Dad died in 2012 when I was halfway through my PhD. But he did leave some modest diaries. They're not, full-blown big diaries that some people write, a couple of pages for each day. They're just a couple of sentences. He started that in 1944 when he first went to the Kimberley. And even though I didn't know I was going to write a book, I probably did have an idea somewhere at the back of my head that I was probably the one who was going to honour his legacy and Mum's legacy as well. So I got a lot of her information from her sisters through oral history. So I've done a lot of oral history stuff in this story. I converted my PhD to book for a general readership. So in fact, one of my aunties, who's now in an aged care home in Derby, said to me, you want to make sure we can read this thing. So you might appreciate that neither of my parents or their siblings had education any higher than primary school. So, they need to be able to access this and read this. Well, the editor at Magabala, she said to me, Cindy, you need to write this in the first person. And I found that really, really hard. I felt shame. It wasn't just my story that I was telling. However, after a while, I started to get used to the idea and I started to get comfortable with the idea, and I allowed myself to do that, and with her prompting as well. So, but once I got into writing in the first person, I was away. It started to flow and I felt more comfortable in it. So I did have the help of my siblings, particularly my sister. I would read stuff to her and she would comment and make suggestions, particularly about us kids growing up on Debesa. So, so writing in the first person wasn't so bad after all. And I guess I felt I needed to be allowed to do that, yeah. So in writing Debesa, I needed to contextualise who my parents were. So in that process, I explored who their parents were. And I was able to uncover a little bit about my maternal great-grandparents. So while I had two great-grandmothers who were full descent Aboriginal people living on Nyingana country, the men that fathered their children, or my grandparents, were non-Aboriginal. So my granny's father, who lived with my granny's father was a Muslim from India. It's now Pakistan, but it was India at the time in the late 1880s. That's when he came out here. And my grandpa's father was a white stockman. So his people live down here. I do see some of them. And so they're quite well off, like most of us, living off the benefits of stolen lands. Yeah, that's the way it is in Australia, and it's something we need to understand better. So all these stories are generally about my mother's side, about mission life, about her siblings, and about my grandpa being a drover. I do write about my Spanish cousins. So some of them followed Dad out here. They followed their Tio is uncle in Spanish, to the West Kimberley, and some of them worked at at Camballen, and I'll talk a little bit about Camballen, and later on they went on to Argyle when they were developing the Argyle Dam and the town of Kununurra. They lived up there. Some of their children were born in the Kimberley and in the East Kimberley, but most of them went back to Spain eventually, and some went to the East Coast. So there's none of them here anymore, unfortunately, in WA. In the book, I include a few interesting aspects of history from the region to complement my family stories. So, for instance, I talk about the development of Camballen, which is on the floodplains of the Martuwarra, and it's a small town that still exists today, despite the failure of a rice-growing experiment in the 1960s and other ventures. They have tried other things over the years, the floodplains, but the little town exists still. But another place that doesn't, that I write about, was a town called Telgano. Come on in. A couple of 100 kilometres south of Broome. It was a small, well-resourced ghost town that had been built to support a British rocket venture. So in 1946, the Australian government had agreed with the British government to engage in a rocket launching trials from Woomera in South Australia. Now, Woomera is an Aboriginal word for throwing a spear with a long trajectory. So the rockets were to be projected 2,000 kilometres across the outback towards the 80-mile beach in Western Australia. And they were to plummet somewhere near Anna Plains Station, which is south of Broome, probably, I don't know, 150 kilometres south of Broome or something. The rockets were called the Black Knight and the Blue Streak, and they were to soar over the Gibson Desert and the Great Sandy Desert, then plunge somewhere in an area that had been proclaimed the Telgano Prohibited Area in 1958. Well, that was the plan. The exclusion zone meant that the Yulparji people were forced from their homelands, so nobody was allowed to be in this exclusion area. And Telgano was built to accommodate 6,000 specialist personnel and support crews. It had a runway, it had a school, it had a hospital, it had houses. But with the onset of the Cold War, technological advances saw the USA's superior weaponry outclass the British and Australian venture, and it consequently folded. So the local people benefited by Telgano's never used infrastructure, and things like a roadhouse south of Perth and a hotel in Broome emerged from those materials. Hi to Natalie, who's joined us today. As I write about going to boarding, I also write about going to boarding school. My parents chose to send us kids to boarding school while they developed a small lease, which is probably a good idea for them. I was just 7 years old when I was sent to Stella Maris College in Geraldton, that was run by the Presentation Sisters. And I went there every year for 9 years, from 1961 to 1969. But of course, I came home at school holidays. And I write about what it was like to go on that 8-hour plane trip from Derby up and down, from Derby to Geraldton in a DC-3. If you don't know what a DC-3 is, or Dakota airplane, you look it up. And I suffered terrible travel sickness. And I write a little bit what it was like at the college. So I might leave it there without telling you any more about the book. But I do want to point out a couple of other books I have here from Muckabala: Homecoming, which is written by my lovely friend Elfie Shiozaki. And this one here, The Boy from Bowden, some people may have read that, Birdham. Bill Dempsey was a famous West Australian footballer. He's still around, I know Bill, and that was written by Steve Hawke, and he really captured Bill's voice in this book. It's lovely, I enjoyed it. I haven't read this one yet, God, the Devil and Me, which is about a fellow who was at New Norcia boarding school, so the way he experienced his boarding days. So, Natalie, to answer your question, what was the writing process like? Was it challenging to convert your PhD into a story for the general public? I did explain a bit about that earlier on. Yes, I was a bit afraid to do that at first, but it had been suggested to me that I do it, and I'm glad that I did, because it seems that people are really enjoying it. I hope my family do. We don't come from this background of reading books and writing books, and so to have done Debesa is quite an achievement, really. In writing this for a general readership, Natalie, I had to, of course, drop all the academic stuff, but there is some interesting stuff in the PhD itself about Indigenous standpoint theory that I used, and also a methodology called microhistory. So microhistory means zooming in on particular areas, on lesser known people, basically. Yeah. So let me see. Jane, I love Homecoming. Oh, I did too. This is beautiful, beautifully written. It's a great book. It's not a very long book, but Elfie has done some great stuff in there, in drawing on stolen generations peoples and her own grandmother's stories. She's gone into the archives and had a look, and she has delivered it beautifully. I'm sure they would be very proud of her. Therese, it's fascinating to see the scene for Debesa. I am looking forward to reading it. I hope you really enjoy it, Therese. My second name is Therese, so we've got similar namesakes. What a fascinating story. Thanks to Better Reading for introducing us to another Australian author. Yes, and the one with a 60,000 plus year heritage, as has Elfie and the other people here, Bill and Alf, were all Aboriginal writers. Will I write another book, Jane? I don't know. Never like to say no, but right now I'll say no, definitely not. I didn't know I was going to write this one. So there you go. And Helen says, I'm writing my life story, concerned about how deep and true I need to write, warts and all, or just skip parts. That's an excellent question. I certainly did not go deep into personal lives. I've just been quite objective in this. I've talked about how we live, but I don't know other people's feelings and thoughts. That's their business, So if they want to write their own biography or personal stuff, they can do that. But no, I steered away from going into personal things. It's not my place. And John, what are you most proud of? Your Spanish or Indigenous ancestry? Oh, I love both. Both. And to tell you, the Spanish mob over in Spain, they love Australia. They love us. They love the Aboriginal, their Aboriginal families here in Australia, and a lot of them know us. But it's my Indigenous ancestry that I know better. This is where I am. This is where I live. This is where I've grown up. So I am extremely strong in my Indigenous ancestry and heritage. Yeah. So would anybody else like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. In writing this book, trees are good, yeah. In writing this book, actually it was 2003 when I was doing my master's degree, I thought I would be able to look into my dad's diaries and find all sorts of things about Nyingana people and how they lived. because for my master's, I looked at coexistence between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people on pastoral properties in the West Kimberley. But I hardly used it for my master's, but I did collect a lot of narratives or oral histories at that time from family. I drove up to Coconut Wells, which is south of Broome, to an interview an uncle, and my dad and sister hopped in the car and came with me. Then we went up to Darwin. Dad kept coming with me up to Darwin. My sister stayed in Broome. I did interview people in Broome. I had an auntie there, and I interviewed my sister. I went up to Darwin. I had people up there to interview, my auntie and my uncle. Then back down to Derby to interview aunties there and cousins I interviewed. So all these oral histories were really important and special. Yeah, but I didn't get to use them till the PhD that I started in 2010. Yeah. What's next for you if not a book? I'd really like to, because I've decided I don't want to work anymore. I've been working as a sessional at UWA, but I work from home as a sessional. I don't have a dedicated desk at the university. So I work from here, and I'm finding it very challenging with technology. Things keep changing, and the systems I use, they keep changing. And if I'm doing any lectures, I have to record them here, then put them up on the system. So I find it all quite hard because I don't have somebody else to talk to. I love the students. They engage with Aboriginal studies really well, but I don't think I'll be doing that anymore. So I wouldn't mind reconnecting with the golf course. I played golf many, many years ago, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't know what I might do from here on, Jane. I might, I don't know, ask me that maybe in a year's time. And Natalie, how has your diverse ancestry, religion and culture influenced your writing? Oh, in a huge way, Natalie. I have had such an extremely strong Catholic upbringing and a very sheltered upbringing, but I don't embrace Catholicism anymore. I mean, I respect people's belief systems. I mean, when you start studying in humanities and social sciences, you become a critical thinker, and things that might have been in the back of your mind but you never questioned it start to come to the front. And but I could understand the belief system. So when I wrote the book, I was able to understand my parents, particularly my father's devotion to Catholicism. So I was able to write about it from that perspective. Ancestry just comes, I don't know, just it's quite easy. I really enjoyed sort of having a look for my great-grandparents and my grandparents and seeing what they were up to. And that came from oral histories and just delving into the archives to see what I could find. So that's probably about it. I hope I've given you some background to, my book, to Debesa. I hope, where is it up here? That's the only copy I've got. Where am I going? That way. That's the only copy I have. I hope to get some more when I go up to Broome in a couple of weeks when we go up for the launch. My husband read this book and he didn't put it down, and he doesn't read. I think it might be about the second or third book he's ever read in his life. But it was great because he was sitting here in the lounge reading, and I'd say to him, where are you up to? Where are you up to? And it was, he could learn more about his wife's family after 47 years of marriage. So I'll leave it at that, and I hope you enjoy the book. So I will say goodbye to you in the way they say goodbye in the Kimberley. I do know how to say that. Galio, enjoy your day.